80-year-old war hero, Arthur Jenkins, is sentenced to die for a crime he didn't commit. As despair looms and time runs out, his loyal German shepherd, Shadow, embarks on a desperate quest to unmask the real killers and clear his master's name. The air in Oakwood City Courthouse hung thick and stale, a suffocating blanket of grim anticipation. 80-year-old Sergeant Arthur Jenkins, a relic of wars long past, stood in the defendant's box, his once proud shoulders now bowed by age and the invisible weight of accusation. His old olive-drab service uniform, the fabric softened by countless washings but still bearing his cherished medals, seemed to hang loosely on his frail, hunchbacked frame. His sparse, white hair lay flat against a scalp visible in patches, and his kind, weathered face, usually alight with a gentle warmth, was a mask of weary disbelief. The gavel fell with a crack that echoed the breaking of a life. On the charge of murder in the first degree, Judge Alistair Blackwood intoned, his voice devoid of emotion, "This court finds the defendant, Arthur Jenkins, guilty." He paused, letting the weight of the word settle. Given the calculated nature of this heinous crime against a public servant, and in accordance with state law, this court sentences you, Mr. Jenkins, to death by lethal injection. A strangled sob escaped from the gallery. Arthur swayed, his hand instinctively going to his chest where his medals lay. I didn't do it," he rasped, his voice a mere whisper against the sudden uproar. His gaze, clouded with pain, found his granddaughter, Emily, in the back row. Beside her, his German shepherd, Shadow, sensing the profound shift in the room's atmosphere, let out a low, distressed whine. Emily Jenkins, a fiercely intelligent law student in her early 20s, felt a cold fury mix with her tears. She clutched Shadow's leash, the dog pressing against her leg, his big, intelligent eyes fixed on Arthur. As guards moved to escort her grandfather away, Arthur's last, desperate look was for his dog. "Take care of him, Emmy," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Take care of my Shadow." Shadow lunged, barking once, a sound of pure anguish, before Emily pulled him back, her own heart shattering. The evidence, as presented by the prosecution, had been a masterclass in deceit, orchestrated from the shadows by the powerful director Marcus Thorne. The victim, a high-level auditor on the verge of exposing Thorne's vast network of corruption within veteran support funds, had been found murdered. Somehow, Arthur Jenkins, a decorated but forgotten hero living a quiet life, had been framed. His fingerprints found, on a conveniently discovered, out-of-place antique firearm, a witness, paid by Thorne, claiming to have seen Arthur near the victim's apartment. It was a neat package, designed to silence the auditor and provide a quick, believable scapegoat. Within hours, Arthur Jenkins, a man who had faced enemy fire with courage, found himself in the sterile, unforgiving confines of the state penitentiary's death row. The harsh lights, the clanging steel, the palpable despair, it was a cruel antithesis to the honor he had lived by, a crushing weight on his already failing health. The clock had begun to tick. The visiting room of the state penitentiary was a cold, sterile box, the thick glass and staticky intercom a cruel barrier between Emily and her grandfather. Arthur, already diminished by age, seemed to have shrunk further in the dehumanizing prison garb. His eyes, though, still held a flicker of the gentle man she knew, now clouded with a profound weariness and the dawning horror of his fate. "It's no use, Emmy," he whispered, his voice papery thin through the speaker. "They've got me. Just look after Shadow. He's a good boy." Emily's young lawyer, Mark Hernandez, a public defender barely older than herself and visibly overwhelmed by the case's gravity, offered what little comfort he could. But Emily's resolve only hardened. "We're going to fight this, Grandpa," she insisted, her voice tight with emotion. "I know you're innocent." Back at Arthur's small, now achingly empty bungalow, Shadow was a picture of canine despair. He'd barely eaten since Arthur's arrest, his usually bright eyes dull, his powerful frame listless. Emily, sifting through Arthur's meager belongings, items returned by the police after their cursory search, tried to find anything, any overlooked detail. Most were just the accumulated memories of a long life, old photographs, service records, half-finished crossword puzzles. As Emily opened a dusty footlocker containing Arthur's research from his volunteer work as a benefits advisor for fellow veterans, Shadow, who had been moping by the door, suddenly galvanized. His ears perked, a low whine rumbling in his chest. He nudged Emily's hand insistently towards a particular stack of papers, then began to paw at an old, seemingly insignificant wooden cigar box tucked beneath them. Arthur had mentioned it during the visit, how Shadow had been strangely interested in it just before his arrest. Puzzled, Emily lifted the lid. Inside, beneath a layer of old, tarnished uniform buttons and tie clips, her fingers brushed against something solid. It was a small, antique brass compass, the kind soldiers once carried. Taped to its underside, almost invisible, was a tiny, folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, Emily found a photograph. It was an old unit reunion photo. Arthur stood proudly with several other elderly veterans. In the blurry background, almost an afterthought, stood two men, Director Thorne's top aide, Eric Cole, and another man Arthur had circled with a red pen, an arrow pointing to him with a scrawled question mark. Beside the photo was a small, crinkled note, the victim's handwriting, the numbers "Open the Vault, Project Nightingale." The Korean phrase was a relic of Arthur's service, something the victim knew he'd understand. Emily's heart pounded. This was it. The first thread. She quickly contacted Daniel Lee, the nervous, low-level clerk from Thorne's agency who'd once worked with the murdered auditor. When she described the note and the name, Project Nightingale, Daniel's voice over the phone turned an octave higher with fear. That was what Mr. Harrison, the victim, was looking into. It's big. Very big. And very, very dangerous. Daniel Lee, his initial terror giving way to a reluctant sense of duty, agreed to a clandestine meeting with Emily. He confirmed that Project Nightingale was Thorne's codename for a massive embezzlement scheme, siphoning millions from veterans' housing and healthcare programs. The man Arthur had circled in the photograph, Daniel identified as a mid-level accountant named Peter Stroud, who had access to Nightingale's sensitive ledgers and had vanished liabilities weeks before the auditor's murder. Stroud, Daniel whispered, knew too much. Armed with this, Emily's next move was to Stroud's last known address, a cheap, run-down apartment building on the city's industrial fringe. She brought Shadow, hoping the dog's keen senses might pick up something the police had missed, or that Stroud himself had overlooked if he'd left in a hurry. From a jacket Stroud had left at a VFW meeting Arthur had also attended, Emily had Shadow lock onto his scent. The apartment was sealed, but the fire escape was loose. Mark Hernandez, despite his reservations about breaking and entering, found his legal scruples overridden by Emily's desperate determination. Inside, the place was a mess, tossed by someone looking for something specific. It seemed hopeless, until Shadow, after a thorough sniffing circuit of the small rooms, began to whine and paw insistently at a loose floorboard beneath a grimy built-in wardrobe. Prying it open, they found a small cavity. Inside was not Peter Stroud, but a battered leather satchel. It contained a change of clothes, a burner phone, and a slim laptop. As Mark tried to boot up the laptop, Shadow nudged his head towards the satchel again, sniffing at a torn inner lining. Emily reached inside and her fingers closed around a small, metallic object, a data stick, cleverly concealed. Just as Mark exclaimed, "It's password protected, heavily encrypted," the sound of a key scraping in the apartment door lock sent a jolt of adrenaline through them. They froze. The door creaked open, revealing two thuggish-looking men, their eyes cold and predatory. Well, what have we here?" one of them sneered, his gaze falling on the satchel. Before they could react further, Shadow exploded into action. A blur of black and tan, he launched himself at the nearest man, a deep, ferocious growl ripping from his chest. The man yelped, stumbling back as Shadow snapped at his arm, not biting to maim but to deter and create an opening. Emily grabbed the satchel and the data stick. "Go, Mark, go," she yelled, shoving him towards the fire escape. The second man lunged for her, but Shadow, disengaging from the first, positioned himself between Emily and her attacker, barking furiously, a truly formidable barrier. They scrambled down the rusty ladder, the men's curses echoing above them. Shadow was the last one down, his barks turning to satisfied yips as they sprinted towards Emily's car, leaving Thorne's goons shouting in frustration. The data stick felt like a burning coal in Emily's hand. It was a victory, hard-won and perilous, but they had something. Something real. Now, they just had to figure out what it meant before Arthur Jenkins ran out of time. The encounter at Stroud's apartment, while terrifying, yielded crucial if encrypted evidence. Emily and Mark knew they were out of their depth. The local police were clearly compromised or unwilling to challenge someone of Director Thorne's stature. Their only hope lay in escalating the matter. Emily, recalling her grandfather's old service buddies, remembered him speaking with respect of a no-nonsense investigator in the state's Bureau of Investigation, Agent Linda McCoy, known for her tenacity and a rumored military background. Securing a meeting was difficult, but Emily's impassioned plea, coupled with the mention of a highly decorated 80-year-old veteran on death row, pricked McCoy's interest. Initially, Agent McCoy was deeply skeptical of their story, especially the part about a German shepherd uncovering vital clues. "A dog found this data stick, you say?" she'd asked, one eyebrow arched. But the raw fear and conviction in Emily's eyes, Mark's earnest corroboration, and the sheer audacity of framing an octogenarian war hero gave her pause. She agreed to look into it, unofficially at first. Shadow, present during the tense meeting in McCoy's Spartan office, seemed to understand the stakes. He sat Perubahan by Emily's side, calm but alert, his gaze fixed on McCoy. When Emily laid out Stroud's few recovered personal effects, Shadow nudged a small, seemingly insignificant address book from the pile towards McCoy with his nose. Intrigued, McCoy flipped through it. Most entries were mundane, but one page had a name lightly circled, S. Green, VA Records Annex. Susan Green. McCoy murmured, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "She's a lifer down at the Veterans Affairs Archive. Old school. Knew your grandfather, Miss Jenkins?" Emily nodded. Arthur had mentioned Susan as someone who knew the VA system inside out. With McCoy now providing a degree of official cover, they visited Susan Green at the sprawling, labyrinthine VA Records Annex. Susan, a woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, remembered Arthur Jenkins fondly. A good man, Sergeant Jenkins. Always fighting for the little guy. When Emily explained their suspicions about Director Thorne and Project Nightingale, Susan's lips thinned. "Thorne," she said with distaste. "He's had his fingers in too many pies. Some files related to his special projects were recently reclassified, moved to deep storage. Highly unusual." Guided by Susan, and with Shadow occasionally whining or nudging toward specific aisles as if sensing something amiss, they navigated the towering shelves. Finally, in a dusty, forgotten section, Susan located a series of misfiled original requisition forms and preliminary audit reports for Project Nightingale. Comparing them to the official, sanitized versions McCoy had managed to pull, the discrepancies were glaring: inflated invoices, ghost vouchers, and, most damningly, signatures that were clearly forged. One particular document detailed a large, unauthorized transfer of funds approved by Thorne, directly implicating him in the embezzlement scheme the murdered auditor and Peter Stroud had been investigating. "This is it," McCoy breathed, the paper trail. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. It was her captain. "McCoy," he barked, "I'm getting calls from on high. Director Thorne's office. They're asking pointed questions about your current activities. Tread carefully." Thorne was fighting back. The net was tightening, not just on him, but on them as well. The news from the prison was a hammer blow. Governor Davies, citing the expedited need for justice in heinous crimes against public servants and undoubtedly influenced by Marcus Thorne's insidious lobbying, signed Arthur Jenkins's death warrant. The execution was scheduled in 72 hours. 3 days. Arthur, already frail, had developed pneumonia in the damp chill of death row. His appeals were exhausted, his body failing. Panic set in, but Agent McCoy, Emily, and Mark worked with feverish intensity. The encrypted data stick found by Shadow was their ace in the hole. Emily remembered Arthur mentioning a young tech whiz, a former Signal Corps specialist he'd helped with a benefits claim, now running a small cybersecurity firm. They found him, Ben Carter, and with McCoy providing secure access, Ben worked around the clock. "It's military-grade encryption," he reported, "but there's a backdoor, almost like someone wanted it found eventually, or Stroud had a failsafe." As Ben typed furiously, Thorne's counteroffensive escalated. McCoy received a direct order to suspend her unauthorized investigation. Anonymous threats were made against Daniel Lee, who promptly disappeared. Susan Green found herself abruptly reassigned to a basement office with no network access. Thorne was systematically cutting off their support. Then, Ben broke through. "I'm in. It's all here." Ledgers, offshore account numbers, coded emails between Thorne and his enforcer, Eric Cole. There's even a short, corrupted audio file. Stroud must have recorded a meeting. He played a snippet, Thorne's unmistakable voice, cold and precise. "He's become a liability. Deal with Harrison. Make it look like one of his charity cases snapped. That old vet, Jenkins, he's perfect." It was the smoking gun. But how to get it to someone who could act, someone beyond Thorne's reach, before Arthur's time ran out? Thorne's men were now actively surveilling Emily's apartment and McCoy's office. They were trapped. Desperation sparked a wild idea in Emily's mind. She looked at Shadow, who sat watching her, his intelligent eyes filled with concern. Arthur had trained Shadow for all sorts of things, including retrieving and carrying messages on their long walks. "General Clark," Emily breathed. General Henry Clark, a highly respected, retired 4-star general, a contemporary of Arthur's and now heading a civilian oversight committee for military and veterans affairs. He was known for his integrity and a bulldog tenacity. If anyone could cut through Thorne's web, it was him. Under the cover of a feigned power outage McCoy engineered, Emily quickly copied the decrypted files and the audio onto a new, smaller data stick. She scribbled a desperate note to General Clark, explaining the situation and imploring him to listen to the audio immediately. She secured the stick and the note inside a small, waterproof pouch attached firmly to Shadow's sturdy service collar. "Find General Clark, Shadow," she whispered, her voice choked with tears as she hugged the brave dog. "Find him. It's for Grandpa." She opened the back door a crack. Thorne's men were focused on the front. With a final, understanding look, Shadow slipped into the pre-dawn gloom, a silent, four-legged messenger carrying an old soldier's last hope. Shadow moved like his namesake, a phantom in the urban labyrinth. He knew the scent of General Clark's home. Arthur had often taken him on walks that passed the general's stately residence, a place of quiet respect. He navigated back alleys, crossed deserted parks, his canine senses on high alert, evading late-night patrols and the occasional car that might belong to Thorne's watchers. Twice, he froze, melting into darkened doorways as suspicious vehicles cruised by too slowly. The weight of the small pouch on his collar was immense, not in ounces, but in the life it represented. He reached General Clark's neighborhood as the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky. The general, an early riser, was already in his study, a light glowing from the window. The main gate was closed, a security keypad visible. Shadow, remembering a loose picket in the back fence from his walks with Arthur, a spot where Arthur would jokingly say Shadow could report for duty, made a beeline for it. He wriggled through, then trotted to the study window, rising on his hind legs to gently scratch at the glass with a paw, a soft, urgent sound. General Clark, startled, looked up from his papers to see the earnest, intelligent face of a German shepherd peering in. He recognized the dog instantly. Shadow? Arthur Jenkins's dog? What in thunderation? He hurried to the French doors, opening them. Shadow trotted in, sat, and offered his collar. The general, bewildered, found the note and the data stick. His eyes scanned the frantic message from Emily, then, with growing urgency, he inserted the stick into his laptop. The audio file of Thorne's damning order filled the quiet study. The general's face turned to granite. He made 2 calls. The first was to the governor's office, his voice a steel whip demanding an immediate, verifiable stay of execution for Sergeant Arthur Jenkins. The second was to the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At the state penitentiary, Arthur Jenkins, weak and trembling, was being prepped for his final walk. The chaplain was murmuring prayers. With less than an hour to go, a phone rang urgently in the warden's office. The call was patched through. The warden listened, his face paling. He slammed down the phone. "Stop everything," he roared. "The governor has issued an indefinite stay." Simultaneously, federal agents, acting on General Clark's irrefutable evidence, swarmed Marcus Thorne's penthouse apartment and his offices, arresting him and Eric Cole. The conspiracy, built on greed and ruthlessness, shattered in the light of day, brought down by an old soldier's integrity and his dog's unwavering loyalty. Part 7, Old Soldiers Never Die, Their Spirit Lives On. Approximate, 185 words for story plus 100 words for interactive ending. Sergeant Arthur Jenkins walked out of the penitentiary not into the harsh glare of execution lights, but into the soft sunshine of a new day, a free man. He was frilier, his body bearing the fresh scars of his ordeal, but his eyes held the quiet triumph of the vindicated. Emily was there, tears streaming down her face, and beside her, tail wagging furiously, was Shadow. Arthur sank to his knees, a difficult task for his aged frame, and embraced his dog, burying his face in Shadow's thick fur. "You did it, boy," he choked out. "You saved an old fool." Director Thorne and his cronies faced a barrage of federal charges, their corrupt empire dismantled. The stolen veterans' funds were traced and began their slow journey back to those who truly deserved them. Arthur's case became a catalyst for reform, highlighting the vulnerability of elderly veterans within the justice system. Arthur spent his remaining years in the quiet company of Emily and the ever-faithful Shadow. He didn't make grand speeches, but his presence at local VFW meetings, Shadow always at his feet, was a powerful, living testament to courage and an unbreakable bond. The legend of the old war hero and the German shepherd who sniffed out a conspiracy became a local touchstone, a reminder that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes, the purest loyalty has 4 paws. An 80-year-old hero sentenced to die, saved by his dog. Arthur and Shadow's incredible fight against corruption is breathtaking. What was the most shocking moment for you in their journey? Comment below. Let's show our respect for veterans like Arthur who face injustice, and for loyal companions like Shadow who define courage. Their bond is truly unbreakable. Do you believe in the profound connection between humans and animals? Share a story of animal loyalty or intelligence that deeply touched you. If this story of an old soldier's ordeal and his dog's incredible heroism gripped your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales that matter. Arthur and Shadow prove that truth and loyalty can triumph over the darkest conspiracies. Justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied, especially when a good dog is on the case.